Um, moving on to, so we went from being straight up rebuild to, okay, our first year is getting in the win column. Now we're just straight up contender. So for me, I'm just going to go through a couple names here. The guys, I'll start Sell. Look, I like these guys a lot. I think they're good players. And actually, this is where, there can be some synergy between someone like me and someone like Chris, where I can go, or even Chase, and go, hey, Chase, I have Chris Olave. You have Tyreek Hill that you want to sell. If I'm already contending, Chris Olave is getting wide receiver 2 numbers. I don't think the quarterback situation is getting any better. I don't think the head coach situation is getting much better, at least in the near future. So, for my best interest to win this year, get my money, Tyreek Hill might be, a little interesting to me. And for you, obviously, Chris Olave is a great player, will be better long term. But I'm trying to win today, this year. So with Tyreek Hill might be super interesting. So Olave and Garrett Wilson, I think both fit the bill as kind of sells. I think if you're a straight up contender, like, maybe I was deep in the playoffs last year, it didn't work out. My core is getting a little bit older. I've got 2-3 shots at, winning, and then it's off back into the rebuild part of the cycle. A Tyreek Hill would be an interesting buy. A Cooper Kupp would be an interesting buy. Using those types of pieces, those guys that are like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, they're getting you wide receiver 2 value, but in Dynasty, they're wide receivers, I believe, like 8 and 9, or maybe 8 and 10, somewhere in there. So they're being valued over their current production because, like, we all agree, their long-term production is going to be a lot better. But yeah, so those are the guys that I'd be selling. And again, like Tyreek Hill is an interesting one. At the right cost, Travis Kelce can be a really interesting one. Keenan Allen is a pretty solid buy for a contender. This is where you are getting into those older guys because they do get pretty cheap, especially around this time of year when people get rookie fever. So, those are some guys that on my teams that I have been contending in, and, I'm planning to keep contending in, that I'm getting interested in.
Adam, real quick to that, do you have any value of kind of throwing it in the middle where you said, you're kind of on the cusp of it, you're trying to get in a big time victory? Do you go for some upside players who maybe are a little bit younger, like a Marquise Brown, for example, a guy who can maybe be a steal for you, but also, be somebody who can be productive right away, but maybe also long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, that's kind of like when you're coming out of the rebuild and you're not quite sure. Kind of what Chase was doing. However, it's still always good to, hey, if I can buy some extra years onto my contention, absolutely. So someone like Hollywood Brown, who I think we all on this show agree is due for some improvement over last year. Absolutely. I think that's a good one as well. On to you, though, Dan. Look, there's a variety of situations we might find ourselves in, contending, kind of coming out of that rebuild into contending. There's the straight up rebuilds. Now, there's some guys where it's like, look, I don't care what the situation is. Either I want in or I'm out. Like, it doesn't really matter what my situation is. I'm buying this guy or I'm selling this guy. Like, my team could be falling apart. I could have just won 3 back to back to back. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm buying this guy or I'm selling this guy. So for you right now, who are those guys where it's like, situation be damned, get them on my team, get them off my team?
Abandon ship.
Yeah, it's time to get out on some guys before it's too late. And the guy who comes to mind first in that scenario is Nico Collins. I get it. His numbers across the board last year, wide receiver 6, looked like he was an elite guy. CJ Stroud made Nico Collins. There's nothing special about Nico Collins, okay? He's 6'4". That's probably the most special thing about him. You're talking about a guy who ran an average 5 40. You're talking about a guy who is an average to below average separator. You're talking about a guy who was 91st last year in route win rate. It was CJ Stroud all the way. And Nico Collins coming up on the point in his contract, his rookie deal, well, the team's going to have to make a decision soon if they're going to extend him. And I think the answer to that is no. Look, Stephon Diggs is there temporarily, for sure. But the idea they went out aggressively to get another wide receiver, I don't think they're super sold that Nico Collins is this player year in and year out. And we can talk all we want to, especially in redrafts. We'll get into it. Who's going to be the number one receiver of the Houston Texans this year? It's a three-way tie. The truth is they're going to eat all into each other. But the guy I trust the most is the receiver who's actually best friends with the quarterback, and that's Tank Dell. I mean, it's been very prevalent since day one who CJ Stroud prefers amongst everybody in that room. It is Tank Dell, which, by the way, in redraft leagues, best ball leagues, he's got the lowest ADP of the three receivers. It's the only one I'm taking. Just to throw that in there, by the way. So Nico Collins is somebody I want out on while I still can, because there's a lot of scenarios in which this can go down. One, he's the most affected by Stephon Diggs. Unless you think Stephon Diggs last season just totally fell off a cliff in the second half, and it wasn't because of the scheme change when they switched things over to Joe Brady, even though that's directly what it's correlated with. He's going to eat the most into Nico Collins' perimeter routes down the field, in zone. He's going to eat the most into that. So already we're looking at a downtick, I think, in Nico Collins, who already had to have Brand Ayuk level efficiency, because we're talking about a guy who only had 109 targets last season. He wasn't getting the ball all that much to begin with. So there's a lot of concern there. If he does move on and go to another team, who knows where he goes? Could it turn to a guy who gets paid big time and then wind up finding out, oh, guess what? It was the quarterback who made you. So Nico Collins, somebody I'm not taking the chance on, because there's nothing special about him to keep him in that upper echelon top tier that he's valued at currently moving forward. That's the number one guy. The other guy, I had to do it because I wanted to get another buy for you, Adam, but I had two sells, and I couldn't decide between the two. I wanted to talk about both of them.
Sell. Abandon ship!
Get out of Rachaad White while you still can, while the light is still on. Legitimately good pass catcher, which might keep him fantasy relevant for a couple of years, regardless of what the situation comes up. And this year's the perfect year to sell him, because there's still nobody on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers depth chart. I think Chase Edmonds is still the depth chart or some ridiculousness. There's still nobody there to take away from the volume. So you're going to be able to sell it to somebody that this guy's getting tons of volume still has every chance to be everything he was, which was an RB1 last season. But volume was all he had. 3.6 yards per carry. I mean, it took him, it was 47th in breakaway run rate. 47th. There's 32 starting running backs. Okay, at best 64 in a platoon. This guy was getting all the volumes, 47th in a breakaway run rate. He had a broken tackle per 30 attempts. It's pathetic. So when it looks at Rachaad White as an actual runner, do you make guys miss? No. Do you make big plays? No. Are you efficient? No. Good pass catcher. That's it. That's all he brings to the table. So it stands to reason to me, and he's not particularly a very big guy either. If he's going to get this level of volume again, you're risking injury for a running back at that size in particular. You're risking a guy that after this year gets put into a platoon situation where you're just hoping he's a flex consideration because of his pass catching prowess. So now's the time to get out on him while you still can. I think all of us here, we talked about it all off season long. We expect a regression for this offense with Dave Canales no longer there. Like, Baker Mayfield's not a superstar anymore. I'm sorry. Like, Dave Canales got the most out of him. It's the only reason why I don't totally blow up Chase's spot about the whole buying on Bryce Young thing, because they do have David Canales over there now. So, like, that's a big factor that's going into this. Mike Evans is a year older. Chris Godwin's a little bit slower. I don't think that offense is going to be as good as it was last season. So now's the time to get out on Rachaad White before it's too late. So those are my two guys. I had to bring them both up. I'm a hater. All this negativity.
just warning the people, Dan. You gotta keep them on their toes sometimes.
Right. Be warned. Don't do it. Get out of it.
Real quick, and then we can go ahead and wrap up. But I gotta ask you, if for a guy like Rachaad White, and we'll use him as the example, but are you selling him right now in the offseason, or are you gonna let him get a couple games and maybe risk that injury, kind of like you were talking about? But potentially.
Yeah, that all falls into a kind of value getting. Right now, Rachaad White's value, I think, is as good now as it would be if he has a couple more good games to start off September. People love Rachaad White. He's younger. He had the big season last year. He has no competition again this season. You know, a lot of other people haven't caught up with the idea that Tampa Bay's offense is likely to regress. So I think his value is just as good now as it would be if he had two good games to start off the season, you know, heading into September. Does anybody know off the top of their head who they open with? I forgot now. I knew it earlier and I completely forgot. I'm drawing a blank on it now. But so I would get out on it before they play a tough team.
He was a pleasant surprise last year in the fantasy community, and you can still take advantage of that and catch somebody like Dan's been talking about, catch somebody high on that, because he was legitimately one of a nice story last year in the fantasy world.
And sometimes those nice stories come to an end, and this show must come to an end. So Dan, you want to take us out of here?
Yeah, absolutely. So next week, same time, 9:30 Wednesday night, we'll be going live and kicking off the team profile series, division by division. I know that doesn't sound great in order. Everybody does division by division stuff, but it's going to be a lot of jam-packed, awesome content. We're going to make it a ton of fun for you guys. And it's really the best way to break down all these players as we get in transition into redraft season and really breaking down what we're going to be looking at from a team perspective all the way down to the players. And by the way, check out Fantasy Football Advice Network, because I've been publishing articles left and right over the past couple of weeks that I'm kind of getting into what we're going to be talking about during this series. So it's 9:30 next Wednesday night. We'll have a guest on. My goal is to have a guest on for each and every one of those episodes like we were doing earlier in the off season. So we're excited for that. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Fantasy Football Advice Network, at FF Advice Network, everywhere on social media. Make sure you download on your favorite podcast app, because we're available to you wherever you like to go to listen to us and download us on the go. Give all these guys a follow on social media. And guys, we'll see you again next week.